Hey everyone, and welcome back to my channel. We've got another unit builder for today, and ooh child, I'm really hyped about our unit today. You already saw the banner, so you already know who the demote is. From the House of Gautier, it is the one and only Sylvain. So, I wasn't originally planning on doing a unit builder for anyone on the banner, as I usually try to prioritize the free Tempest trial unit. However, I do really like Sylvain. I didn't at first, but he really grew on me after the time skip in my Blue Lions run. Coupled by the fact that his artwork is so good, I am left feeling incredibly tempted to not only build him, but go all the way and plus 10 him. That being said, let's take a look at his kit and see what is going on. Sylvain is making his debut into FEH as a Cavalry Green Tome unit. At 5 stars level 40, his neutral stats read as HP 42, Attack 32, Speed 35, Defense 27, and Resistance 16. He also doesn't have any super boons, which is unfortunate, but it is what it is. Now, Sylvain's got a really interesting stat spread, to say the least. His attack is definitely on the lower side, especially when you compare it to Dorothea's, who's got 5 points over him despite being a dancer. You'll definitely want to invest some of your resources into building this up. On the other hand, his speed is 35, which is actually decently solid. He's not super fast by any means, but it can definitely be brought up fairly high with the right skills. As far as bulk goes, he's got 27 defense and 16 res, which admittedly is a bit lower than what I expected. I was kind of hoping either one of these would be a little higher, and when we take a look at his weapon now, we'll see that his bulk begins to look even weirder. So in his weapon slot, Sylvain comes with the Melon Float Plus, which I affectionately refer to as Baja Blast because that's what it looks like to me. This tome comes with 12 might and has the bizarre effect of granting attack and resistance +5 in combat during the first engagement in each player phase and enemy phase. There's 2 parts to this weapon that I have a problem with, and I'll break it down. My first issue with this weapon is the in-combat stat boost. +5 attack is great for Sylvain, but when he's only got 16 base resistance, +5 res does not do very much for him. 16 res is incredibly low, and with his base speed of 35, he would have gotten so much more mileage from +5 speed instead. This really drives me insane. And then the second issue I have with this weapon effect, and this applies to literally every unit on this banner who's got the same weapon condition, is that these stat boosts only work once during each phase. I mentioned this in my test stream from 2 nights ago, that it's so dumb that we have a dancer on this banner because as soon as Sylvain is danced back up, he loses that in-combat buff until the enemy phase starts. It discourages the use of dancers, and it discourages the use of Gale Force as a special, which Sylvain can't run, but would have been a solid option for Ingrid, perhaps. I don't know. I don't know if Intelligence Systems is trying to shift the meta away from dancers or what, but these weapons have me feeling some type of way, quite honestly. Anyway, sorry for the soapbox. It's a weird weapon for Sylvain, and aside from the super cute weapon animation, I don't blame anyone for trying to give him a different tome. Moving on, Sylvain comes with drawback. I'm not sure that there's much to add that the skill description doesn't already cover. I personally don't use drawback, but I have seen it get some use in certain Ether Raid teams. Next, Sylvain comes with Chill Res, which inflicts -7 resistance on the foe with the highest res wherever they are on the map each turn. It's a solid budget-friendly option for him that's really flexible and honestly a safe choice for many units. Can't go wrong with this skill. And the last skill he comes with is Rouse Attack Defense 3, which is, once again, a very interesting choice for him. It grants him attack and defense +6 out of combat so long as he doesn't have any allies directly adjacent to him at the start of the turn. On one hand, it's really awesome that we're seeing this skill in the 4-star pool, as it's a great C skill overall, and having it that much more accessible is definitely good news. What's interesting to me, however, is that defense and resistance are Sylvain's 2 lowest stats. His weapon wants to beef up his res, and his C skill wants to beef up his defense. I think it's okay to salvage one of these stats, but I don't know about trying to build both of them. Nevertheless, this is still a great skill to have, and if you're looking for fodder, it's a great opportunity to grab it. With all of that having been said, let's finally move away from his base kit and start building him. First up on our list, we're going to kick things off with our budget build. So for build number 1, you'll immediately notice that I replaced his weapon with a Grand Blade. As I already mentioned, I have some mixed feelings about his Baja Blast tome, and so as a budget-friendly alternative, I decided to swap it out for a good old trusty Grand Blade. Though this tome does increase our special cooldown cost by 1, it has the added effect of granting him an in-combat boost to his attack equal to the total number of visible buffs on him. In other words, Blade Tome users want wave skills, tactic skills, hone and fortify skills, oath skills, and in our case, rouse skills to grant us that extra damage boost. It's for this reason that we're going to keep Sylvain's rouse attack defense, as that grants him an additional plus 12 attack in combat, on top of the plus 6 attack and defense he already gets from this skill, totaling out to plus 18 attack and plus 6 defense. See where we're going with this? In that same vein, wave skills are another easy, budget-friendly way of stacking visible buffs if you don't have support from other allies. Since we've already got Sylvain's attack and defense covered, I thought it made the most sense to go for even speed wave as our sacred seal, which grants him plus 6 speed on even number turns. Combined with his rouse skill, we're now looking at a total of plus 24 attack in combat on even number turns. Pretty nice. Now, working our way back up, Chill Res is a solid budget-friendly option for him. Any tome user will appreciate the debuff to the enemies, so if you're tight on resources, definitely feel free to leave his B skill as it is. However, Vantage definitely works as a safe enemy phase alternative should he meet the HP threshold. I'm sure it's certain to help him out in a pinch, especially with all of those visible buffs stacked onto him. For his A skill, I decided to go with Swift Sparrow 2 as a safe player phase option that's available on quite a number of units now. However, if you decide to run with Vantage in the B slot, I might suggest Close Counter as an alternative, should you happen to have the fodder lying around. Sylvain's got some workable defense and should be able to make use of this skill to counter close range threats. And lastly, for his special, I decided to add in Glimmer. Moonbow also works, but ideally we want a low cooldown special, as this Blade Tome has the added effect of making it harder to build that special up. In other words, a 2 cooldown special becomes a 3 cooldown special, and a 5 cooldown special becomes a 6, so in an effort to keep that cost as low as possible, Glimmer or Moonbow might be your best options. Okay, and that wraps things up for build number 1. It's definitely an interesting take on a typical Blade Tome build, especially if you decide to run with Close Counter Vantage. Just make sure to be wary of any foes with Panic or Lull skills, as that'll completely undo all of those bonuses that we've been stacking up so far. That being said, let's switch gears and move on to build number 2. So it actually took me a really long time to come up with build number 2, as I was really struggling to find a clear niche for Sylvain. However, since we know that rouse skills in general are still fairly rare, I thought it'd be interesting to try to build around his C skill and see how we can make the most out of it. And well, this is the result. Starting with his A skill, I decided to plug in Close Foil. Unfortunately, at the moment, Close Foil is only available on Midori, a 5-star red archer, but it's a cool skill that grants the unit the ability to counter close-ranged melee threats, while also granting them attack and defense plus 5 in the enemy phase. It's a really nice skill, and though he isn't able to necessarily counter dragon foes, this skill really starts to turn him into a close-range tank. Now, because this build is largely focusing on his attack and defense, we're sort of abandoning his speed, which is why we've got Quick Riposte in his B slot to help him double on the enemy phase. Cavalry units don't have access to that many great B skills, and so this is a good option for him that synergizes nicely with our enemy phase build. Should you decide to invest in his speed, a Lull skill might be a solid alternative. Lull attack speed or Lull attack resistance would be my recommendations. Now, to further bolster up his defense, I've decided to plug in Sturdy Stance 2 into his Sacred Seal. Needless to say, we're basically just stacking his attack and defense as high as possible now. And though it's not available in the Sacred Seal Forge just yet, Bracing Stance 2 would also be another good option for him later down the road. The skill provides defense and resistance plus 4 on the enemy phase instead. And the reason I'm even mentioning Bracing Stance is because for this build, I wanted to keep his melon float. Quite honestly, I like the attack animation, so I wanted to see if I could make it work somehow. And for this build, I decided to run with a Refine in defense to really get that stat up as high as possible. And lastly, this brings us over to our special, which is Bonfire. Bonfire has a cooldown cost of 3 and grants a damage boost equal to 50% of his defense. Now, for the record, I'm like 90% sure that I will be plus 10ing Sylvain sometime this weekend, and so just to give you an idea of what I'm working with, here are what his stats look like for this exact same build, but at plus 10. Between Close Foil, Rouse Attack Defense, and Sturdy Stance, we're looking at plus 15 attack and defense total, which gets us to 49 defense. That means that when Bonfire activates, I'm looking at roughly plus 25 damage, which is a really solid boost for a special. Okay, and that wraps things up for build number 2. It took an incredibly long amount of time for me to come up with a cohesive build that I like for him, and the best part about this build that I actually really like is that the A skill is really the only expensive one, albeit a very rare skill to begin with, but still. Nevertheless, I'm pretty sure this is the build I'm gonna ultimately run with for my Sylvain, so I'll be on the hunt for a Midori real soon. Lastly, here are what his stats look like when fully merged up. The only reason I'm still hesitant on my second build is because at plus 10, Sylvain comes up to 40 speed, which is pretty decent. He'll definitely still be outsped by quite a few units, but I could definitely see a lot of people investing in his speed and making a nuke out of him, which is another good option for him, honestly. With his weird stat spread and his base kit, I'm honestly super curious to see what everybody else comes up with, because Sylvain falls into this weird gray area where he could sort of function as a player phase mage cav, but he could also sort of function as an enemy phase tank. It's a weird middle ground to take, and it was definitely a challenge for me to figure out how to build him, that's for sure. Oh, and before we wrap things up, I came up with a third build at the last second that I sort of like that I thought might be worth sharing. I don't have the time to make the graphics for it, but it's a fun Fury Brazen build that revolves around the Madness Flask, which can be found on Halloween La Rochelle. It does a really good job of building his attack, speed, and defense all at once, which could be pretty cool. Pause the video if you want to take a closer look at it. Anyway, that is it for today. If you like what you see, please consider liking and subscribing. I post at least one new video each week, and I'm gonna start live streaming sometime later this month. We've also got a really awesome Discord server that you're more than welcome to join. The invite link is in the description below. Please let me know in the comment section if you plan on summoning for Sylvain, or better yet, if you have any ideas on how to build him. I have never struggled so much with figuring out how to build a unit before, so I'm super excited to hear what some of you guys can come up with. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. My next video will likely be a unit builder for Speedo Lawrence. I cannot believe those words just came out of my mouth. Anyway, stay tuned for that one. Until next time, happy saving, happy summoning, and take care.